Her husband watched as his mother beat her, but what happened next will leave you speechless. Nalia endured unimaginable pain and humiliation, but she wasn't just surviving, she was plotting her comeback. Her journey from being a broken wife to a powerful queen of justice will shock you, and the way she made them beg will leave you stunned. Nalia entered the Banfu compound like a ghost walking into a storm. Her steps were small, hesitant, as if each one was a question she couldn't answer. She wore a plain raffia dress, stitched by the hands of her late uncle, the only family who ever showed her love. Around her, the tall walls of the Banfu home seemed to breathe power, swallowing every bit of light that touched her skin. She looked around silently, taking in the mansion, the guards, the strange silence of a house that was filled with people but empty of warmth. Beside her, Tando walked like a man with no strings in his chest. He was firm, expressionless, like a stone that had forgotten how to feel. His words were sharp, spoken without care. "From today, you are my wife," he said without even glancing at her. "Obey my mother. Do not shame me." His tone was not welcoming. It was warning. It wasn't a homecoming. It was a silent sentence. As the massive compound gate slammed shut behind her, Nalia flinched. It was the sound of freedom leaving her life. No one welcomed her inside. No one smiled. The air smelled of oil and dust, and the silence was louder than a scream. She noticed servants glancing from corners, whispering when she passed, but no one approached. It was clear. This house had rules, and she was already outside them. Her husband didn't walk her to her room. He didn't hold her hand. Instead, he disappeared into the inner quarters, leaving her standing alone by the heavy wooden door, where a small woman pointed at the maid's room without speaking. Nalia walked into it, a small, dark space with a torn mat and one broken clay pot. This wasn't a bride's welcome. This was something else. As she sat alone that first night, listening to laughter from the family hall where she wasn't invited, she realized that her marriage was not about love or even companionship. It was about control. Tando had married her, but not to build a life. He had married her to keep her quiet, to keep her small, and his mother, whom she hadn't even met yet, held the real key to everything. In that cold, dusty room, Nalea's heart beat slowly, not with fear, but with a quiet strength, the kind that builds in silence. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at the copper bracelet around her wrist, a parting gift from her uncle. And somewhere deep in her spirit, something shifted. She didn't know it yet, but the gate that had slammed behind her was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Kizora Banfu stood in the center of the compound like a queen without a throne, her chin always high, her eyes always low on others. When Nalia first approached her, Kizora didn't speak a word. She didn't offer a welcome, not even a glance of curiosity. Instead, she stared at Nalia the way one might inspect a broken item at a market stall, with disgust, with judgment. Her voice sliced the air like a blade. "No child, no beauty, no wealth. What exactly do you bring?" Her tone was sharp, bitter, full of venom. Nalea's lips parted slightly, not to reply, but from the shock. Still, she held her silence, too stunned to breathe, too proud to plead. Tando stood beside them, arms folded, eyes empty. He didn't defend her. He didn't interrupt. He just watched, like it wasn't his problem, like Nalia was a stranger he'd bumped into on the road, not the woman he'd just married. From that moment, the rules of her new life became clear. Nalia was not a wife in this house. She was a ghost with hands meant for work and a mouth meant to stay shut. Before the sun touched the sky, she was already awake, her hands deep in cold water, scrubbing the Banfu dishes. By noon, her back ached from bending over stone floors, brushing away dust that would return with the wind. By night, she served food on heavy silver trays, but never tasted it. Not a single grain of rice passed her lips from the family table. She ate in the dark corner behind the servants' quarters, chewing quietly so no one would hear. One afternoon, as she poured a cup of water for herself after hours of cleaning, Kizora watched her like a snake in the grass. Then slowly, she spat into the cup, not by accident, deliberately. Her eyes locked with Nalea's as she did it. A challenge, a humiliation. Nalea's hands shook as she placed the cup down without drinking. Her throat was dry, but her pride was louder than her thirst. Tando was sitting nearby, sipping wine from a gold goblet. He saw it all. He saw his mother's cruelty. He saw Nalea's trembling hands. He saw her pain. But he didn't move, didn't speak. He tilted the goblet to his lips and drank slowly, as if he were blind, as if his silence could erase the scene in front of him. Nalea didn't cry. She didn't yell. She swallowed her pain like she swallowed her hunger, quietly, bitterly, but inside her something hardened. Every insult, every slap of disrespect, every cold shoulder, they were becoming bricks, not to build a wall around her, but a strength inside her, a strength neither Kizora's tongue nor Tando's silence could crush. She had no voice in the house yet, but her silence. It was growing teeth. In the Banfu house, joy had no place. The air was thick with silence, and even the wind seemed too afraid to move. Every step Nalea took echoed like she was trespassing in her own life. Laughter was rare, reserved only for those Kizora favored, never for her. And kindness, that didn't exist behind those walls. Kizora made it her mission to break Nalea's spirit, piece by piece. Whenever guests visited, she would wait until their eyes were on her before launching her attacks. With a twisted smile, she would point at Nalea and say things like, "Look at her, this cursed goat without horns. Not good for milk, not good for children, not good for anything." The guests would shift uncomfortably, some pretending not to hear, others offering fake laughs just to please Kizora. At every dinner, Nalea was forced to kneel by the table, not out of tradition, but as punishment. Her knees would bruise against the hard tile floor while everyone else sat comfortably, eating and chatting. She would serve them silently, her head bowed, eyes lowered. Tando never told her to rise. He never even looked at her. He sat proudly at the head of the table, chewing slowly, nodding at conversations, acting like she didn't exist. The humiliation didn't end there. One morning, while preparing breakfast, Nalea burnt a loaf of bread, just a little too dark at the edges. Kizora stormed into the kitchen like a fire had broken out. Without a word, she raised her hand and slapped Nalea across the face, so hard that she stumbled back and hit the shelf behind her. Spices fell to the floor. The scent of pepper filled the room. But Nalea's tears didn't fall. Her cheek burned. Her pride burned more, but she stood still. Tando was right there, sitting by the window, reading his newspaper. He paused only to pick his teeth with a toothpick, then calmly flipped to the next page. No reaction, no defense, just silence, as if slaps were as normal as morning tea. None of the women in the house offered comfort, not the aunties, who wore gold bangles and looked away, not the cousins, who whispered about Nalea when she passed. They watched her suffering like a performance, something to be observed, not stopped. Nalea moved through the compound like a shadow. She cooked the meals. She cleaned the house. She washed the clothes. But in everyone's eyes, she was invisible. No one spoke to her unless it was to insult or command. No one asked if she was okay. No one noticed when she bled from her hands after scrubbing the courtyard stones for hours. She was a prisoner wearing a wife's name. And in that cold house of humiliation, surrounded by luxury but starving for love, Nalea learned the truth. Sometimes the deepest pain isn't loud, it's silent. It's the kind that folds itself into your bones and waits for the day it can rise. The sun rose hot and early on market day. The compound buzzed with activity as traders prepared their baskets and carts. Nalea had gone to the market like always, barefoot, carrying a woven bag, her mind spinning with a list of things to buy. But in all the rush, she forgot one thing: cassava leaves. Just cassava leaves. A simple mistake. But in the Banfu household, mistakes were not allowed. As soon as Kizora saw the empty space on the kitchen shelf, her face twisted with rage. She didn't shout, not right away. She grabbed Nalea by the ear and yanked her through the compound, across the gate, straight into the village square. Her grip was strong, cruel, and full of pride. The villagers paused. Some stopped picking yams. Others looked up from their stalls. All eyes followed them as Kizora marched her daughter-in-law like a criminal toward the center of the crowd. Without a word, Kizora reached behind her wrapper and pulled out a cane, long, thick, sharp at the end. She didn't wait for a reason. She didn't wait for shame. The first stroke came down hard across Nalea's back, then the second, the third. By the fifth stroke, the market had gone silent. By the 10th, the crowd had gathered. Children stopped chewing their sugarcane. Women covered their mouths. Men shook their heads. But no one moved. No one stopped her. Kizora's voice rose with each strike. "This is what happens to useless wives," she screamed. "Let the whole village see." And the whole village did see. They saw Tando too. He stood near the fruit cellar, arms crossed, watching everything. His wife being beaten in public. His mother shouting like a mad woman. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just stood there like a statue carved from stone. Nalia's body flinched with each hit, but her mouth stayed closed. No scream, no plea, not a single tear fell. She didn't beg, she didn't collapse. She just stood there, skin burning, head held low, but dignity still clinging to her like a second skin. People whispered, some shook their heads, others looked away, ashamed for her, but still, no one helped. Because in Zungu, the Banfu name held too much power. No one dared challenge Kizora, not even when she broke her cane from striking too hard. Finally, the storm passed. Kizora dropped the cane, spat on the ground, and turned back to the compound with her head high. Nalia stood alone in the dust, shoulders trembling, but not from weakness, from fury. She didn't run, she didn't speak. She picked up the broken cane, looked at the crowd, and then walked home barefoot. That day, Nalia didn't just feel pain. She felt a shift. Something inside her cracked, not from fear, but from power. Her silence that day, it was louder than any scream, and though no one knew it yet, that was the day her story began to change. That night, while the compound slept under the weight of its own cruelty, Nalia slipped out the back gate. Her back still burned from the cane. Her heart felt heavier than the night sky. She didn't run. She just walked, slowly, until the noise of the compound was far behind her. Her wrapper was damp with silent tears, and the dust stuck to her feet like regret. She wandered into the alley behind the old granary, a forgotten place where no one cared to look. The wind blew gently, as if whispering secrets to the stones. Then a voice came from the darkness, raspy, deep, unexpected. "You're not weak," it said. "You're waiting." Nalia froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned slowly and saw him, an old man sitting against the wall, legs folded, eyes white with blindness. His clothes were torn, his bowl empty, yet his voice carried the calm of someone who had seen too much and feared nothing. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Just a man who listens," he replied. He reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out a small copper bracelet. It was old, dull, and scratched by time, but something about it felt alive. He held it out. "This has no magic," he said, "but it knows how to survive." Nalia looked at it, confused. "Why me?" "Because your name," he said, "will echo louder than the one who beats you." Her hands trembled as she took it. The copper felt warm, almost like it had been waiting for her all along. She slipped it on her wrist, and in that moment, something shifted inside her. Not loudly, not suddenly, but deeply. The old man smiled, though his eyes saw nothing. "Go home," he said softly, "but walk like a seed, not a shadow." She didn't understand at first, but she nodded. That night, Nalia returned to the Banfu compound through the same gate that had swallowed her dreams. But her footsteps were different now. They were quiet, yes, but steady. She no longer tiptoed like a guest in her own life. She no longer flinched at the sound of her name. She walked as if each step planted something, courage maybe, or strength, or something still growing. Kizora didn't notice. Tando didn't care, but the house felt it. The air felt it. Even the ground beneath her bare feet felt it. Something had changed, and it all began with a stranger in the alley, and a bracelet that reminded her, silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes silence is the sound of power getting ready to speak. Weeks passed, and the days in the Banfu compound dragged on, filled with the same routine of pain and silence. Nalia did her chores quietly, but something inside her had started growing. The bracelet on her wrist was now a silent companion, reminding her that she was more than what they saw. One afternoon, Kizora ordered her to clean the old barn behind the compound, a place so dusty and forgotten that even rats had abandoned it. Nalia tied her wrapper tighter and stepped inside. The air was thick, filled with cobwebs and old memories. She swept slowly, lifting boxes and broken stools, clearing corners no one had touched in years. Then, behind a stack of mouldy cloth, she noticed an old chest. It was sealed with rusted metal and wrapped in goat hide that had faded into a dull grey. Something about it called to her. With shaky hands, she untied the hide and opened the chest. Inside, buried beneath layers of old wrappers and rotting books, she found it, a leather-bound journal, thick and worn, the edges burnt from age. She opened the first page, and her heart stopped. It was her father's handwriting. She sank to her knees as her eyes scanned the words. Each page held secrets, maps of lands, coordinates marked in red ink, signed documents with tribal stamps, and something that made her chest tighten. ownership papers. Her father, Chief Akano of the Uvuno Hills, had hidden all of this before he died. The land was gold-rich, abandoned after the tribal war, and forgotten by many, but not by him. He had left it for her. Nalea was not just a girl married into suffering. She was the last living heir to the Uvuno Hills, a daughter of royalty and legacy. She closed the journal and held it close to her chest. Her eyes burned, but no tears fell. Not anymore. She stood slowly, wiped the dust from her wrapper, and took one last look at the barn. Her decision was made. No one would break her again. That night, as the compound slept, Nalea packed a small cloth with the journal, the bracelet, and the copper ring her mother once gave her. No goodbye, no note, no apology. She slipped out of the compound with the same silent steps she had once entered with. Only this time, they weren't filled with fear. They were full of purpose. The moon lit her path as she disappeared into the darkness, her shadow stretching long behind her. She didn't know exactly where the road would lead, but she had a name, a legacy, and a blueprint written in her father's own hand, and that was enough. The morning sun rose over the Banfu compound, but something felt different. The usual clang of metal pots, the soft shuffle of feet, and the quiet sobs that once echoed through the walls were gone. Kizora stepped out, tying her wrapper, scanning the courtyard. No sign of Nalea, no broom sweeping, no water fetched, just silence. She scoffed, not even pretending to be worried. The rat ran away. Good. I knew she had no spine. Tando sat under the mango tree, legs crossed, biting into roasted maize. He didn't ask questions. He didn't search. He didn't flinch. Let her rot, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Days passed, then weeks, and life in the Banfu compound continued without Nalea. Kizora praised herself, telling visitors how she had finally cleansed her home of bad luck. Tando moved on quickly, as if Nalea had never existed. A few months later, he married Zaba, a woman who wore more makeup than manners. She strutted into the compound like she owned it, her bracelets jangling louder than her laugh. Zaba had no humility. She barked orders, wore glittering fabrics, and turned the compound into a place of loud gossip and fake smiles. But Kizora welcomed her with open arms, finally getting the daughter-in-law who matched her arrogance. The villagers whispered. Some pitied Nalea, others forgot her. A few wondered where she had gone, but no one dared ask aloud. Fear of Kizora's tongue kept most lips sealed. But what none of them knew was that silence does not mean surrender, and absence does not mean defeat. Far beyond the hills, across the rivers, and past the forgotten paths, Nalea was alive. And not just alive, she was rising, learning, building, preparing. Destiny, you see, does not shout. It walks softly, patiently, like footsteps in the early morning mist. Easy to ignore, impossible to stop. They thought she was gone forever, but destiny does not forget its own. 2 full years slipped through the hands of time like dry sand. The village of Zungu remained unchanged. Dusty roads, gossiping tongues, and the proud Banfu family still walked with lifted chins. Kizora grew bolder, Tando more arrogant. They thought Nalea had vanished like a morning mist, but destiny doesn't vanish. It prepares. Then, one hot afternoon, the sound of engines shattered the village silence. Not bicycles, not carts, jeeps, 10 of them, all black, sleek and polished, crawling through Zungu like a moving shadow. Behind the windows, guards with dark glasses sat still as statues. The villagers gathered, mouths open, hearts racing. No one knew what was happening. Then the door of the first jeep opened. A woman stepped out. Silk robes kissed her ankle. Her earrings shimmered like sunlight on metal, gold, shaped like spears. Her chin was high, her stare sharp. It was Nalea, but not the Nalea they remembered. This woman had presence. She was no longer the girl who knelt at dinner or cried behind water pots. She was the CEO of Uvuno Enterprises, the rightful heir to gold-rich lands her father once ruled. Now she owned mines, trade routes, and buildings across 3 provinces. She didn't walk into the Banfu compound. She walked to Zungu Square, where the villagers gathered like moths around fire. A podium was set, cameras flashed, a press conference was called. In front of the whole village, she spoke, calm but firm. The Banfu family, she said, have defrauded their workers. They laundered funds through ghost accounts. They abused a woman they thought had no worth. Gasps flew like birds. Then the papers came out, thick files with proof. Names, transactions, witnesses. People turned to look at Kizora, who was frozen like a statue. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Tando tried to speak, but all he managed was a nervous chuckle. Then the orders were read aloud. Kizora's business license revoked. Tando's accounts frozen. Zaba's flashy car confiscated. A thick silence fell over Zungu Square as the truth unfolded, layer by layer. Nalea didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream, but every word struck like thunder. The same villagers who once pitied her now looked at her with wide eyes, full of awe. She didn't look back at Kizora, not even once. She had returned, not for revenge, but for justice. And justice came wearing silk robes, golden earrings, and a calm smile that shook an entire village. Kizora stood in the middle of the market, her headscarf slipping, her hands trembling as officers sealed her last stall. The same stall where she once barked orders and called others worthless. Now, her baskets lay empty. No one came to buy. No one came to help. Her voice cracked as she tried to plead, but the officers didn't listen. Her market license had been revoked. Her accounts were frozen. Her name, once feared, was now stained. Back at home, Tando sat on the dusty steps, staring at the wall. Everything around him was fading. The house, once proud and full of life, was now quiet, like a tomb. Paint peeled off the walls. The tiles cracked. The air smelled of defeat. He turned to his new wife, Zaba, her gold bangles flashing as she packed her bags. She didn't even look at him. "Zaba, please," he whispered, voice low, almost broken. "Help me. We can fix this." She laughed, not kindly, just cold. "Fix it with what? Your empty pride?" And just like that, she left, dragging his last chest of gold behind her. He tried to run after her, but his legs gave out. He fell to his knees, alone, as the sound of her high heels faded down the road. The following week, a large sign was hammered into the front yard. "Property auction today." Strangers walked through their home, inspecting furniture, measuring curtains, pointing at walls like it was a shell to be picked clean. The house of Banfu was no longer theirs. It belonged to whoever had the highest bid. But in the middle of the storm, Nalea was calm. She didn't scream. She didn't spit insults or raise her voice like Kizora once did. She watched from a distance, quiet, still, dignified. She didn't need to curse them. Life had already done it. Kizora, once so proud and cruel, now sat outside the village temple, her wrapper torn, begging for coins. Tando, once the village's loudest man, now avoided the streets. People whispered behind his back. Children pointed at him. His name had become a warning. But Nalea, she walked with grace, with silence, with strength. She never looked back. Because when power is real, it doesn't shout. It simply arrives, and everything around it falls silent. 1 week later, under the same wide tree in the village square, where once Nalea had knelt with bruised knees and an empty stomach, 2 figures now knelt in the dust. Their clothes were torn, their faces hollow with hunger and shame. Kizora's headscarf barely clung to her head, and Tando's eyes, once proud and sharp, now darted around nervously like a scared child. No one greeted them. No one offered help. They were invisible to the crowd, just another pair of beggars the village had turned its back on. Kizora's voice was barely a whisper. "Nalea," she said, her lips cracked, her hands shaking. "Please, just a piece of bread. We have nothing." Tando didn't speak. He just stared at the ground, unable to lift his head. This was the man who once watched Nalea suffer in silence. Now, he sat beside the woman who had made her life hell, both of them broken, both of them forgotten. The villagers watched in silence. Some shook their heads, others whispered, but no one interrupted what was unfolding. It was like the air itself held its breath. Then Nalea appeared, dressed in a flowing white robe, her copper bracelet glinting in the sun. She moved with quiet power. She didn't rush. She didn't look down. She walked with the calm strength of someone who had known pain and conquered it. In her hand was a loaf of bread, fresh and warm. She paused near the tree. Kizora's eyes lit up with hope. "Nalea, please, my child," she said again. "Just bread." Nalea looked at her, then at Tando. She said nothing. Instead, she turned slightly and handed the bread to an old beggar sitting a few feet away, a man who had always been kind to her in small ways, offering her shade once, or a smile when no one else would. She gave the bread to him gently, bowed her head with respect, and walked on. Kizora gasped softly. Tando looked up, confusion in his eyes. But Nalea never looked back. The message was clear. You can beat someone's body. You can chain their hands. You can burn their dignity and call them worthless. But if destiny has planted a seed inside them, no storm can kill it. It will grow silently, powerfully, until the roots break through stone. Years ago, they made her kneel. Today, she walked tall while they crawled for crumbs. She didn't need revenge. She just needed to rise, and that was enough. What Nalea went through was a journey of pain, silence, and suffering. But through all of it, she found her strength, her purpose, and her destiny. The story of how she was mistreated, beaten, and forgotten, only to rise and make those who once brought her down kneel, is a testament to the resilience that lies in each of us. It's a reminder that no matter how dark the days may seem, there's always a seed of power and purpose within us waiting to grow. If you were moved by Nalea's strength and the triumph of her spirit, share this story. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their pain is not the end of their story, but the beginning of something greater. Share it to remind everyone that no one, no matter how broken or beaten, is ever truly defeated. If you felt the power of this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories like Nalea's, stories of resilience, strength, and triumph to the world. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being a part of this community. Remember, you are never alone in your struggle. Like Nalea, you have the strength to rise, and your story is just beginning.